Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Climate Confident Podcast. My name is Tom Raftery, and with me on the show today, I have my special guest, Robin. Robin, welcome to the podcast. In fact, Robin, welcome back to the podcast. You have been on before, so thank you for coming back to us. But would you like to introduce yourself for anyone who hasn't heard you or seen you on the podcast before?
Yes, thanks a lot for having me back. So I'm Robin, coming from Estonia, and I'm the CEO and founder of eAgronom. So my background is that I'm coming from the farming family. So my father has 1,400 hectare organic grain farm, and my grandfather has same size conventional grain farm. So basically, I have been in the middle of those two worlds my entire life,
Hmm.
but I ended up studying computer science. So in 2016, my father needed a new tool to manage our family farm. And well, I ended up building something to him. And then other farmers wanted to start using this as well. And today there are already, I think, over 3,000 farmers managing 1.7 million hectares in 15 different countries. So initially, that was mainly as a farm management software.
Okay.
You manage your farm, what crops do you grow, give tasks to the tractor operator, government reporting, inventory management, etc. But
Hmm.
already in the really first prototype, we had something called humus balance calculator. So humus is the richest part of the soil, half of this is carbon. We had no business idea behind this. And
Okay.
frankly, no farmer was asking about this as well. But it was important for us to communicate that every decision as a farmer that you're making also influences your soil. And in the long run, makes sense to take good care of your soil. So we had this humus balance calculator in our tool already as a first in the first prototype. And then and it was part of our core mission to also promote the soil health and so on. And we always wanted to do this. But
Hmm.
then in 2021, we had an opportunity to launch our carbon program, to work with offsetting, insetting food companies, landlords, banks, all of the different stakeholders to bring incentives to farmers to promote soil friendly farming practices and really to accelerate the transition toward sustainable farming.
Okay. And you said you were based in Estonia, and there are 3,000 farms or farmers on your platform now. Are they all based in Estonia?
No, they are based in different countries. So our biggest markets are actually Poland and Spain. But since we say that since we are farming together with our clients in Estonia and in Spain, then we have two of the most extreme conditions in Europe. So you have Estonia when there is really wet and cold and etc. And then you have Spain on the other side of the Europe that is really dry and warm. But yeah, we are operating in 15 countries, mainly in Europe, but also in three African countries,
Mm,
Kenya, Rwanda, and Tanzania.
wow. And what kind of crops are the farmers on your platform growing?
Mainly arable crops, so rotational crops like wheat, corn, beans, oil crops, and etc. But in Spain, we are experimenting with a small volume of olive trees as well.
Oh, nice. Yeah, good. I'm surrounded by them here in Andalusia. This is the one of the big regions for olive production. Nice. So, what are you doing for farmers now? If I'm a farmer on your platform, what do I get from eAgronom?
Well, we begin already before you are on our platform. So the core of our business is promoting regenerative agriculture practices. So that means, and in the end, well, platform, this is just a tool that helps to do it. But what we do is together with our local partners, we set up field trials and events in all of the markets we operate. And these are to show the farmers how in their specific region it is possible to apply profitably some practices that take good care of their soil and increase their profits in the long term even more. So this might be experimenting with different cover crop mixes. Some mixes work better for one region, another works better for another region. Then also,
Robin,
yep.
you might explain for people who are listening what a cover crop is. I come from an agricultural background. I know, but maybe not everyone listening does.
It's a really, of course. So I guess if you drive around, then in the autumn, quite often you see that there is nothing growing in the land. And this is because the next crop on that land is going to be summer crop, though it is going to be seeded in the spring.
Yep.
And the harvesting already happened. So you see basically you see black or brown soil. So we are using this moment over there to grow something as a cover crop just to cover the land and through photosynthesis increase more biomass and capture more carbon that will later turn into the soil. So it has, I guess, two or three positive effects. One, your soil is covered, so the wind erosion is not blowing the soil away. Secondly, you are adding more carbon because plants are growing, and with photosynthesis, you're removing CO2 from the atmosphere and you're adding more carbon later to the soil. And we can speak later why this is important as well. And thirdly, you will add more of other nutrients as well. The most, well, straightforward nutrient is nitrogen, that some plants are working together with bacteria to fix nitrogen from the air so that the next plants can use this. But plant roots are also going deeper in the ground to make other nutrients also available for the next crop. So it has several benefits. But the thing is that farmers they haven't done cover cropping that much as much as they do the main crop, cash crop.
Hmm.
So that's why we are over there experimenting with different ways to grow it, different mixes, but also different ways to implement this. For example, one of the things that we have been experimenting now is seeding the cover crop during exactly before harvesting during your last spraying ground. So that means that you already put the seed in the ground, and after harvesting, it gets light and the cover crop starts growing really quickly. So that again speeds up the growth and you will get more biomass. And some of the things we do work and some don't. And both are really important for farmers because then they see that we have done those mistakes for them and they don't have to do those expensive mistakes.
Okay, interesting. And you mentioned regenerative agriculture. What exactly is that?
Well, I guess this is a really broad term, but in our mind, it makes, in a way, it may, the main goal over there is to farm and grow food while being in synergy with the nature. So taking good care of your soil. So today, the conventional farming is farming, unfortunately, in a way that you have less and less carbon in the soil every year. So we are using this really slowly. Uh, you can build up the soil later as well, but it takes time. So
Mm.
basically we are using these resources. It's like burning oil. We are using the soil as a resource and you will have less and less soil. In regenerative farming, you will have more and more. The other part of this is increasing the species richness, the soil life. And there are several researches that if everything else is same, then the soil that has more earthworms will have a better yield as well. So
Right.
these things matter. And then, well, key part of it is also finding ways to reduce inputs. So how to get the same kind of yield while reducing the amount of fertilizers and chemicals that you use. So taking care of nature is really important, but we believe, and many other farmers also do believe, that as important is also to make it profitably
Sure.
and to continue growing the food as well. Because the global population is growing
Hmm.
and we will need more and more food, even if we reduce food waste, go more plant-based, etc. We still need more and more food. So we cannot just well reduce the profitability or reduce the yields. We have to find a way to maintain it, but to make it in a sustainable way. And it's possible. We see it, but now it's all about scaling it, promoting it, and accelerating this transition.
Okay. And from a practical perspective, what kind of practices are done to make farms more or agriculture more regenerative?
Mhm. Two of the most common ones is adding cover crops, so
Hmm.
increasing biomass, and then also second one is reducing cultivation to the place that you don't cultivate at all. zero cultivation. So it is tricky from one side because historically the cultivation what happened, you release some nutrients, you fight with weed, so you have to find other ways to deal with this. One example is also crop rotation. If you grow
Right.
only one crop all the time,
Hmm.
then weeds get used to this. But if you change crop every year, that means that the environment for weed is also changing. So this helps to fight both weed, but also different insects and plant diseases as well. Incorporating animals to accelerate the process of rebuilding the soil. And these are the most basic ones. But we
Hmm.
also see that unfortunately this is not enough. We have to go beyond this, even though those first ones that I mentioned are fairly easy to implement compared to some other practices. So they still require new knowledge, but at least our team has the capability to help farmers to implement those profitably. But then there are also more challenging ones like agroforestry. So continuing the food production while also implementing some trees. And the challenges with this is that, well, implementing trees may have some extra cost and they may have some negative impact on the crop growth and etc. It can also have some positive impact if you do it in the right way. But this is a really, well, perhaps not a novel practice because agroforestry has been over here for, I don't know, from the beginning of times, but
Hmm.
it hasn't been implemented in a commercial farming. And because of this, we today have to set up field trials to find in different regions ways for farmers to implement it. And hopefully, step by step, let's say in 2027, 2028, 2029, and so on, farmers will start implementing it more and more. Because this is the only way to offset um, the emissions from the animal production as well, which is, well, we can do a lot to reduce, but we will never reach to zero emissions. So we have to find a way to balance it out.
And explain for me, like I'm a simpleton, how does agroforestry help? Is it just that you're planting some trees and therefore they're capturing carbon and therefore you can claim carbon credits for the capture of that carbon? Or is there some other benefit that I'm missing?
Mhm. Yeah, well, it has some positive sides and it has some negative sides. So, well, one of the very clear positive ones is that yes, you will store more carbon. But then there are also some others. In some areas, it can work as a windbreak. So when it's really windy, and
Hmm.
that's interesting, plants can be stressed out because wind as well. So if it's really windy, you will get less yields. So in some places that can actually increase the yield because of this. For some specific crops, especially in the south and warmer regions, uh, the shadow actually helps. It provides protection from the sun. And
Right.
then you go to Estonia or Sweden, where you also operate, and shadow is a problem, especially in the
Mm.
spring, where you see that near forest, the snow is always melting the latest and etc. Then it can increase the total food production per hectare if the trees that you implement are nut trees or fruit trees. So
Yeah.
you can then grow food on top level and then on the ground level as well. The
Right.
total food production is same or is even growing. But the challenge is that in that case, farmer has to set up the entirely new operations.
Mm.
How do I harvest nuts? Where do I sell it? And etc. So there are plenty of challenges with this. There are some trees that are also fixing nitrogen from
Okay.
the air together with bacteria, so you can add more nutrients. And quite often, well, you can also choose the tree species that where the roots go deeper in the ground,
Hmm.
and then you get nutrients from there. And then with leaves, you can bring it on top so that it's actually available for the plants as well. And one of the most interesting like agroforestry types that we want to experiment, especially in Spain,
Hmm.
is to use trees to rebuild the soil. So basically, even to have like well, to have bunch of trees growing on the field like a line, and then when they are, let's say, 3 to 5 years old, so you have to cut it quite early. So then you cut it and you spread it around on the field to put some more organic matter to accelerate the building of the organic matter in these really dry regions.
Okay.
But at the same time, this is also something that has not been proven in a large scale today.
Okay. And just from living here in Andalusia in the south of Spain and seeing a lot of the olive plantations or olive groves that are around, it always makes me kind of curious because when you see plantations or groves of olive trees, the soil underneath them is generally has been cleared. So it's there are no plants underneath them. And it's done on purpose, you got to think, by the farmers because I don't know, are they spraying or are they plowing or what they're doing? But naturally, there should be weeds, grasses, things like that in the soil underneath them, but there's not. And surely, if they left those plants grow under the olive trees, they would A, be enriching the soil, and B, increasing the biodiversity, and C, you'd think, increasing the yield of the olives. Consequently, uh, am I misunderstanding or?
Mhm. You're really correct from many aspects. First of all, that's true. Quite often farmers are even cultivating under olive trees or at least spraying to kill. And there are some regions why they do it. I can mention in a moment. And well, having some plant cover would have several benefits, like
Hmm,
increasing the nutrients in the soil in the long run, biodiversity, plant health, and etc. There are a few reasons that why farmers are still doing it. One, and well, it makes sense a lot, is the risk of wildfire.
uh,
So because the grass gets really dry, and imagine if your plantation gets burnt down, so this will be really expensive. And then in the short run, you actually, in really short one, in a 1 year's perspective or a few years, you might have well competition for the olive trees if you have some other plants below this as well. Competition to get nutrients, competition to get water, and etc. In the long run, this competition won't be a problem because you rebuild the soil and your water holding capacity increases. You
yeah,
actually have more nutrients in the soil. But since quite often farmers have to live well from one harvest to another harvest,
hmm,
so they really have to maximize the next income to pay the debt or land rent or whatever, then this becomes a problem, and that's why some incentives are needed to accelerate the process of changing and the application of soil-friendly practices.
okay. And you're mentioning incentives now, and you also said earlier that it needs to be done profitably. So, where are these incentives and profits going to come from?
Mhm. And first of all, still the key focus is in implementing the practices in a way that they will quickly become profitable for you. With no cultivation at all, it's easy. You reduce a lot in the fuel cost, and soon you will start actually reducing your like the chemical cost, the fertilizer cost, and etc. Man hours, you have to do less work on the field and so on. But you can do it also in a way where your yield is reduced, and then that's a problem. With cover crops, the benefits perhaps come a bit later, but still the problem is that if you do it in a bit wrong way, then you can also influence negatively your yield for the next year. But the key and kind of 90% of the, or even 95% of the benefit can come from practice implementation itself. But then you but the problem is that this comes in a bit of not in the first year maybe, but in the second, third, and so on. So to accelerate the process and to give additional incentives to reduce risk to cover some of the costs, there are different schemes that are available. And one is carbon income. So I think today still the most common kind of carbon income is through offsetting schemes,
Mm,
where farmers change practices, store more carbon in the soil, and these credits are purchased by some companies from many industry, airlines, banks, you name it. And the thing is that for food sector to truly become carbon neutral, eventually these credits or emission reductions or additional removals has to stay inside the food value chain. But that's happening more and more. It takes time,
Mm.
but if you think about those big names like Mars or Nestle or Coca-Cola and etc., they all have their sustainability programs or regenerative agriculture programs. The thing is that the scale of those programs are they're not at full scale, so that not all farmers can benefit from those already today. And then many farmers also, well, sell their products to some other companies who today don't have the region ag program set up yet. So the offsetting part is still really important so that we wouldn't have to say to farmers that, hey, stop, we cannot subsidize you today. You have to wait for 3 years, and then the players in your value chain, your clients who buy grain from you are ready to compensate. But today you have to wait. So we don't want this to happen. For
Mm.
this, offsetting is really good transition financing. But at the same time, eventually those credits have to stay inside the food value chain. And now on top of this, there are also some other schemes like, well, governments are subsidizing certain practices. And the EU has stated very clearly that private support and public support have to work together. We don't have two planets, like a private planet and then the public planet is one planet, and we all have to, so all of our efforts have to go and support the same emission reduction targets. That banks give a bit better interest rates. So if you buy electric car, it's quite common already, but we work with some banks who today give better terms also to sustainable farmers. And in some cases, landlords do the same. But the biggest, eventually, I think the biggest impact will be done by the food sector itself. So in the end, the end consumer, they will get food that is grown with lower emissions and in a sustainable way.
Okay. And are the food companies today getting involved with farmers, or is this something that's going to happen in 3, 4, 5 years' time?
Mhm. I think today, in most cases, it's piloting.
Okay.
In some cases, it's already scaling a bit as well. But yeah, the scale of this, you could call it like a pilot or like maybe slightly beyond pilot in some cases
Hmm.
where the scaling begins. But one of the challenges is that quite often food brands are actually not purchasing directly from farmers. So you can have maybe 5 different companies in the middle. So you have farmer, then you have some farmer union or grain buyer, then you have different processing companies, then you have some company like food brand, let's say Coca-Cola or Pepsi, then you have a grocery store. So the chain is quite long.
Mm.
So it's easy to set up pilots, but then if you actually want to start scaling it, it takes time. That's why we also quite often work with those who are farmer plus one companies, like let's call them like grain buyers or farmer unions. We say to them
Mm.
that, hey, let's bring farmers together to apply sustainable farming practices today. We have initially buyers outside of the value chain to incentivize these chains, but you have a right of first refusal for those credits so that eventually you can keep them. And together we can find in your value chain those sponsors who are ready to incentivize this. So in that way, we can already, well, accelerate the process a lot. Because in the end, the goal is the same for everybody to change the value chain emissions and to make them lower, to apply soil-friendly practices. But it just takes time for a food brand to get with their initiative to all of the farmers.
Okay. Okay. And I assume then that on your own platform, on the eAgronom platform, farmers have a way to baseline, measure, and report their emissions.
Yes. So the first thing that we have is a really good tool for the data collection. That's something that farmers don't like at all. And it's a bigger challenge in this industry than you could ever imagine before
Right.
you join it. But we need good quality data. We also cannot ask like 5 questions and then pay the incentives based on this. So that would be borderline greenwashing.
Yeah.
So we have to go into details. So automating and as much as possible is a key over there. So that's one. Second part is verification. So with satellites, we verify that the most important data that farmers gives us correct. And then the third part is reporting.
Mm.
So we have reports that are suitable for the carbon offsetting programs, like for Verra Auditor, for example, but then also for food companies, for banks, for governments, landlords. So all different kinds of reports. And yes, in the end, farmer gets overview of their baseline emissions and then how it has been changed in time.
Okay. And when you say suitable for banks as well, I'm assuming then that if a farmer can show that their emissions are lower, their cost of capital, their cost of loans, etc., should be reduced. No.
Mhm. In some cases. So probably in 5 years, it will be like a standard. Like today, if you buy electric car, I think in any bank you get better terms. The leasing will be a bit smaller. The problem with farming is that it's more difficult for banks to understand which farmer is sustainable and which farmer is not.
Mm.
So that's why they have postponed this product offering in some cases. But we work with few banks and we all follow. In European Union, there's something called sustainable finance taxonomy. So this is
Right.
describing for different industries what are the sustainable practices.
Mm.
And farming is not part of the taxonomy yet, but it was part of the proposal.
Okay.
And so today we are following the proposal, and unfortunately banks cannot claim it as a green loan,
Mm.
but they say that they already want to get started today. So they want to set up all the processes and so on, so that later when it becomes official, they already have a head start compared to others. So, and today the difference in capital is not that big as well. It's like 0.3 percentage or something like this,
Mm.
but it's still something.
Yeah.
So it adds up together with other things. And it's really important message that, hey, this is what to expect. Today it's the difference is small, but maybe in 10 years, you can only get the loan if you apply certain practices.
Okay. And in some industries as well, this would have an impact for insurance rates. Is that similar for agriculture, or does it not count for insurance at all yet?
Well, it certainly will. I think
Mm.
insurance in Europe is less common than in North America. That's one thing in agriculture, but it certainly will for three reasons. One, same as banking, is that eventually those companies their shareholders will demand, and the companies who finance them will demand that they have to move their portfolios toward more sustainability. That's one. Second is the regulation risk. So in case of banks, let's say the farmer who already applied sustainable practices has a smaller risk that the farmer compared to the farmer who just has to start this, let's say, in a few years. So every change is a risk. But then, especially in the insurance, soil-friendly practices are also reducing the risk of drought. So if you have a really long dry period, then if you have more carbon in the soil, that means your soil water holding capacity increases
Right.
and you can survive this really long dry period. So basically these practices reduce the risk of damage. And we know that because of the climate change, there will be more and more those dry periods. And that's, well, one of the biggest risks for the companies who insure.
Okay. Okay. And where is all this headed? I mean, agriculture is supposed to be net zero by 2050, as far as I know. Is that likely to happen, do you think? Will we be able to get there?
Yeah, it is possible, especially in Europe, but I think in other countries as well, and other regions as well. Like we are operating also in Africa. So in Africa, the main driver is not maybe the government, but it is that the soils are really fragile. But
Okay.
because of warm temperature, you can also rebuild it faster than in other regions. So the benefits of those practices are even bigger. But we believe that it is possible, and especially important is to not only rely on the practices that are there today, but also to innovate and find some other practices to make them scalable as well, like agroforestry or some other more challenging practices.
Okay, cool. We're coming towards the end of the podcast now, Robin. Is there any question I did not ask that you wish I did, or any aspect of this we haven't touched on that you think it's important for people to be aware of?
Oh, I think it was really good conversations, and well, I guess if there are any food companies who are listening, then I would say that their work is really important in
Mm,
making this change happening. So agronomically, practice change is happening and it's possible, the sustainable and soil friendly practices. And it's even inevitable that farmers will change their practices. But if we really want to meet the timeline, then we have to have some extra incentives. And this is where food sector can really help, is already helping, but that help has to grow and go beyond what we do today.
right. So there needs to work harder is essentially what you're saying. That would be on the food company's report card. Needs to work harder.
Yeah, well, I guess we all have our role to play.
Yeah, right. Great. Robin, if people would like to know more about yourself or any of the things we discussed in the podcast, where would you have me direct them?
I think LinkedIn is the best way to approach me.
Okay, I'll put your LinkedIn link in the show notes so people can find you there. Great. Robin, that's been really interesting. Thanks a million for coming on the podcast today.
Thanks a lot.